We are now ready to assemble our first garment. We are going to be knitting a pullover, and you need to go back through the techniques you have learned so far and decide first of all which cast-on you want to use. Whether you use the mock ribbing, the latch tool rib, have advanced to your ribber technique section, or whether you want to use the hung hem is your choice at this point. You will cast on the number of stitches that are required for your pattern, which you will find in your manual. You will knit your cast on and knit the number of rows in your hem as indicated. Once you have knitted your ribbing, which we have on the machine at this point, you will turn your row counter back to 0. At this point, we will knit from the top of our ribbing to our armhole. We have now knitted from our ribbing up to the underarm, and it is time to take off our stitches at the underarm for our set-in sleeve. Opposite the carriage, you want to bring into holding position the number of needles required in your pattern. You want to take a piece of ravel cord, laying it into the latches, and hand knit these stitches off with the ravel cord. Then, with your scrap yarn, you again want to lay the thread into the latches and hand knit those stitches with scrap yarn. After you have hand knit those pieces or those needles, you want to take your latch tool and bind the stitches off around the post so that you do not lose them. Now, taking your carriage across the machine, you will knit to the other side of the machine, and you will take the same number of stitches off on the other armhole edge. With your ravel cord, and then your scrap yarn. Again, you want to bind these stitches off so that they do not get away from you. We will now knit back to the other side of the machine, and at this point you need to determine which neckline you will be using, whether you will be using the V-neck or the round neck that we discussed earlier in the tape. In this sample we will use the V-neck, and so what we will be doing is be placing all stitches opposite our carriage into holding position. We will take our center stitch off on a piece of scrap yarn, and now we will be knitting only on the one side of our garment. We will remember to place our hold button on. We will knit one row, and we will follow the decrease schedule set up in our pattern that's in the manual. On the armhole edge, you will be still decreasing to create the curve of your armhole, and on the appropriate rows, you will be using the 3-eye transfer tool to make your V-neck opening. On the armhole, again, we are using the 2-eye transfer tool, and on the V-neck, we will be using the 3-eye transfer tool. It is a good idea to take your claw weight on the side of your V-neck to help make sure that those stitches drop correctly. And then you will continue to knit up your V-neck. When you get to the shoulder, you will remove those stitches on scrap and ravel cord as we did in our sample. Once you have removed those stitches on the scrap and ravel cord, you will have to return to shape the other side of your neckline. Remember to adjust your row counter to where you started the V-neck opening, rethread your carriage, and at this time you will remove your holding button. You will knit one row, and then you will shape according to the decrease schedule in your pattern, using the 2-eye transfer tool on the armhole edge and the 3-eye transfer tool on the neck edge. After you have completed your front and your back, you want to go ahead and make both of your sleeves. You will cast on in the same way that you cast it on for the bottom of your sweater, and you will knit the ribbing. Then at the end of the ribbing, you will go into your stockinette stitch and knit up to the armhole, just as you did for the pullover. This is a blousey sleeve and will require no shaping in the sleeve section. If you decided to do some shaping, you would use your increase tool and increase as we discussed at the first of this tape. When you get to the arm's eye, you want to have your machine threaded and place your hold button on to shape the top of the cap of your sleeve. Just as when we shaped the armhole, opposite the carriage, you will place stitches into hold, and you will remove these stitches on scrap yarn. You will knit one row across and repeat on this side of the machine, again removing on scrap and ravel cord. Now you will knit the top portion of the cap of your sleeve, decreasing using your decrease tool. To get this bind off out of your way, take your claw weight and hang onto the side stitches this way. That will keep the scrap yarn that you have removed from the machine from getting caught up into your sinker plate. Knit the number of rows required for your pattern, and using the 2-eye adjustable tool, you want to transfer and decrease a stitch on each side of the needle bed. Knit the number of rows required for your pattern, and again decrease the number of stitches, or decrease one stitch on each side of the needle bed. You will continue in this manner, shaping your cap as the pattern is charted. When you get to the top of the cap of the sleeve, you will have your hold button on, and you will short row the very initial top of the cap in order to have a smooth curve. Opposite the carriage, you will place the number of stitches required into holding position, knit one row, and manually wrap your end needle. Opposite the carriage, the same number of needles will be placed into hold. You will knit one row and manually wrap those stitches. Again, opposite the carriage, you knit one row, wrap your end needle, and again, we place stitches into hold. You will continue in this manner until you have finished short rowing the top of the cap of your sleeve. At this point, you will break your yarn and remove your stitches on scrap and ravel cord. When you have finished completed knitting your back of your garment, you need to block that before you can go any further. In blocking the back, you want to take it to your blocking board and gently apply steam to make sure that you take down the side curl on each side. After applying the steam, you can turn your garment over and touch up the front side a little as well. When you have completed blocking the back, do take measurements to make sure that you have your garment at the proper size. And in measuring, you want to take your tape measure and measure from arm's eye to arm's eye, making sure you have the proper measurement. You want to measure from the bottom of your ribbing to the arm's eye to make sure you have the proper measurement, and you want to measure the arm's eye opening. As long as all of these measurements are correct, then you can proceed with the front and 2 sleeves of your garment. After you have finished the back and the front and the sleeves, you will block all pieces before putting them together. Your finished sleeve will look like this before it is assembled. You will have blocked it, you will have ribbing at the bottom, you will have your sleeve cap here with your scrap yarn where you bound off at the armhole, your scrap yarn at the top, and this is your decrease schedule. Now we will show you how to put it together. Once you have blocked the back and front of your garment, you will join the shoulder seams on the knitting machine. You do want to make sure that if you are going to hang a ribbed band or a hung hem at the top of your garment, that you do only join one shoulder at this time. For our first garment, we will be using a crocheted edge so you can join both shoulders. You want to take your back and you want to hang it with the knit side facing you. Folding back your scrap yarn with your ravel cord stitches facing you, you want to go into your open stitches and hang them onto the machine. You will only be hanging the shoulder stitches at this point. Once you have hung the appropriate number of stitches for your garment, you will bring those stitches or the needles forward to holding position, thereby getting the stitches behind the latches. Then take the front of your garment, and now with the purl side facing you, remember the knit side was facing you originally, you want to sit and hang the same stitch onto the needle, but this time we're going to keep it in the latch and we're not going to let it go behind the latch as we did before. You also want to make sure that when you are hanging your front and your back together, that you check to make sure that you have hung armhole to armhole and have not gotten the wrong sides together. Once you have hung these shoulder stitches into their latches, you will manually knit one set of stitches through the other set of stitches. Bring your needles all the way forward to holding position, and with a tail, if you have left one long enough to bind off with, you will bind off these stitches around the posts. If inadvertently you have not left a tail long enough, you can join a new piece of thread at this point and bind them off around the posts. This now has joined our shoulder seam, and because we are crocheting, we would go ahead and do the other shoulder seam at this time in the same manner. And now all we have to do is finish our garment by seaming it and putting all the pieces together. After you have finished putting your shoulder seams together, you can remove the scrap and ravel cord from your front shoulder only. You cannot remove it from the back shoulder at this point because we still have open stitches that need to be finished off. But you can get this out of the way by pulling on your ravel cord to separate the scrap yarn and then pulling your scrap away from the garment. Before we sew the side seams, we will place the sleeve into the opening. With your machine and with the needles that came as spare needles, you received a tapestry needle that we will thread at this point for seaming purposes. In seaming the arm's eye, you want to Kitchener stitch your open stitches of the garment to the open stitches of your sleeve opening. You will come in from the front side of your stitch, go across to the other piece, and come in from the back side. Pull up on your thread, come back to the first side, coming in from the back side of that stitch, and go back out the next stitch. You will go back over to the first side. You will come in towards the center of your work, back out. Come from the back side into the center, then back out toward yourself. You'll always go over to the new side as you are seaming up your arm's eye. Once you have gotten past the stitches that are open on the arm's eye on the sleeve set-in, then you will be seaming bar to bar on that side, but as you see, we still have open stitches on this side, so we need to go into open stitches still there. On this side, we will go in and now pick up the bar or the top of the stitch and pull our needle through, come back to this side and again pick up as we have been doing, going in from the front side of the stitch and coming back out towards you. You will continue up the sleeve in this manner. Once you get up to where you are seaming bar to bar, which is in this area of your sleeve, you will actually come in here and pick up a bar, go back to the other side and pick up a bar over here. Then you will come back to this side and pick up a bar and go back over to this side and pick up a bar. Once you have a few rows picked up, you can pull up tight on your seam to bring it all together. Don't bring up too tight to begin with because then you can't see where to go back into to finish your seaming. I recommend that you seam your sleeve cap up to about 2 inches below the shoulder point on both sides of your sleeve. Then at that point we will verify that we have enough stitches to go across the top and seam them in open stitches to bars as we did down in the sleeve opening. The bottom of your sweater or your side seams will be seamed identical to the section of the sleeve cap where you seamed bar to bar. You will go into one side of your garment, pick up one bar, come over to the other side and pick up a bar on that side. You can pull up your stitches about every 6 to 8 rows depending on the yarn you are using. When you pull up, your stitches will form right next to each other and you cannot tell where your seam is. This is our finished product as far as our pullover is concerned. We are showing you the completed round neck version. We also showed you in the assembly process the V-neck, which would have a crocheted edge.